Hello everyone, and welcome to today's railway tale. Today's subject is a little narrow gauge railway in Kent called the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway. Located near the retail park in Sittingbourne, this small railway has been here since 1905, serving the local papermaking industry until 1969. This 2-foot 6-inch gauge railway has been quietly working hard, travelling between its wharf at Sittingbourne and the docks at Ridham. Now, I am going to warn you, today's video is a long one, so let's get comfortable. The railway was developed by a papermaker called Frank Lloyd, who needed a way to transport pulp and raw materials between his dock at Ridham and the Swale estuary to his paper mill at Sittingbourne. That was built in 1867. Originally, he had used the creek that runs alongside the railway, but this had silted up over years and the need for a railway grew. In 1923, the mill at Kemsley opened, and at the time it was the largest paper mill in Europe. During this time, the railway became a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation, and it had over 10 miles of track in total. In 1936, the company that owned the railway and mills changed hands to the Berry family, and then later the Bowater Corporation took over the running of the mills and the railway until the line's closure in 1969. So in 1905, Locomotive's Premier and Leader arrived from Kerstewart and began hauling various trains of pulp and raw materials between Ridham Dock and the mills. These two locomotives were later joined by 14 other steam locomotives, 2 fireless locos, 1 diesel and 1 battery-powered locomotive. After Leader and Premier, in 1908 Excelsior arrived, and in 1920 Superior arrived. Both were sold to the Whipsnade Railway in 1969, and in 1921 the tank locomotive arrived on the railway and was the sole battery locomotive, but was sadly scrapped in 1969. Sadly, there is no picture available of the tank. 1 year later, in 1922, Conqueror arrived and is now part of the Vale of Rydal Railway Collection. In 1924, 2 locomotives arrived, being Melia and Unique. Melia is the only locomotive to have Hackworth valve gear instead of the standard Stephenson valve gear. Unique, on the other hand, was the first of the 2 fireless locomotives, and oddly, when you look at her, she is somewhat oversized compared to the rest of the locomotives on the railway. Both are still at the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway. Victor joined the fleet in 1929 and was the other fireless locomotive on the railway. Sadly, this locomotive was scrapped in 1967. The 1930s arrived, and so did Alpha in 1932 and Triumph in 1934. Both were built by W.G. Bagnall. And joining the fleet in 1936 was the first standard gauge locomotive called Jubilee. The area around Ridham Dock had a small standard gauge connection to the Sheerness branch on the main line, and Jubilee was used to shunt wagons around this system. 4 years later, in 1940, Superb joined the fleet, and in 1942 Rattler was purchased from the Cape Copper Company in Swansea, but was in a bad condition and was scrapped later in 1950. Sadly, there are no pictures of the Rattler. In 1943, Pioneer arrived to help on the standard gauge system from Smith, Peterson and Co. This was the oldest engine on the railway system, being built 1885, and was scrapped in 1954. Sadly, no pictures of Pioneer are available that I can find online. In the 1950s, more locomotives arrived, starting with Chevalier, built by Manning Wardle in 1915 for the Chatterton and Upnor Railway. 3 years later, 2 more locomotives arrived. Monarch, a Bagnall articulated locomotive of 0440T, that was later sold to the Welshport and Llanfair Railway in 1966. In 1953, the railway's only diesel locomotive, later called Victor, built by Hudson Hunslet for shunting work, arrived on the railway. And then in 1958, South Eastern Chatham Railway's P-Class number 178 joined the standard gauge fleet from British Railways and was renamed to Pioneer 2. And then finally in 1968, two BR Class 04 diesel shunters arrived, being D2259 and D2228, and they worked at Riddham Dock until 1979 when they were scrapped. Wow, that is an awful lot of locomotives to go through, and not to mention the huge amount of rolling stock that I still haven't mentioned yet. But don't worry, we're not going to go into details with all of those. Next, we're going to talk about the preservation history of the railway. During the line's preservation era, a few events took place that I feel need to be spoken about. Firstly, in 2007, the Sittingbourne mill closed and the railway, albeit a visitor attraction now, was told they need to stop operations, and the SOS campaign began. The SOS campaign was the Save Our Steam Railway campaign, and after lengthy talks between the railway and MReal, the current owners of the land, a 125-year lease was agreed between the Kemsley Down station and the halt at Milton Regis near the Asda supermarket. And for a while, after the 2008 season ended, no trains ran on the railway. After the mill at Sittingbourne was demolished and the new Morrison supermarket was built on the site of the former mill, the railway was able to operate trains between the halt at Milton and Kemsley Down, before being able to run back into Sittingbourne Viaduct Station in 2012. Now we're going to talk about something a little different. As previously mentioned, the Chattendene and Upnor Railway. In 1978, the SKLR acquired 4 passenger coaches, numbered 196, 199, 200 and 204, and these came from the Welshport and Llanfair Railway and are in use from time to time on the railway, with the exception of number 204, which is currently undergoing a major restoration at the railway. Now, since 1969, the railway has been known as the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway and is still running today, but uniquely on the original track bed of 2 miles that runs today, and since preservation, 2 other locomotives have joined the fleet. Firstly is the locomotive known as Edward Lloyd, a 040DM Ruston and Hornsby from the Nettleton Top Iron Ore Mine, arriving in 1972. And then in 2004, Barton Hall, a 4W diesel hydraulic, built by Hunslet and is from the Royal Naval Armaments Depot at Dean Hill. And this locomotive also spent some time on the Welshport and Llanfair Railway. The Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway operates between normally Easter and the end of September, running every Sunday with some special events in between, and a link for their website is in the description below, and all of their news and events can be found there. I hope you enjoyed this dive into the history of the Sittingbourne and Kemsley Light Railway. And these videos are part of the Railways Tales playlist on my channel. And if you find these enjoyable, please do let me know, because I love creating these sort of videos and deep diving into history. And with that, all that's left to say is thank you for watching my video on the little line to nowhere.